Welcome back to the Legal Trans Woman, where we advocate, and I say fiercely advocate, for transgender and gender variant people in America and across the world. Oh my gosh. And happy post. I just need to say that. Happy post 4th of July. Happy post the Great American Fair. Happy post Donald Trump turning our country's 250th birthday into one big, ugly, crappy event all about him. Thank God we are past that stuff. Okay, now, I mean, that there's all kinds of other stuff coming. I know. I mean, what they're doing to the White House right now, God, I know. Okay, but put that aside. We have a great show. Another great show. This week's interview is with journalist Christopher Wiggins and his reporting about one of the brave people of color that was on that DC Metro subway train that was packed with Patriot Front white nationalists. You're gonna find that this interview, Christopher, to be fascinating. I also have, of course, my usual news bites and random acts for you. But as always, let's begin with this week's big story, and it's about political allyship for the trans community. I mean, there are two politicians. I mean, there are multiple. I mean, we've got Sarah McBride running out there, but she's trans. I'm talking about allies. Okay, we have two politicians, one a member of the Senate, another a member of the House, who have become very vocal in favor of protecting, uplifting transgender humans, particularly those who are younger. The backdrop here is that we've repeatedly heard from various Democratic politicians and pundits that the 2024 election was lost due to the, quote, transgender issue, unquote, which Republicans so adroitly exploited. One of those Democrats blaming trans people was Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton, who right after the 2024 election famously said that he didn't want his daughters, quote, getting run over on a playing field by a male or formerly male athlete, unquote. And he directly blamed the party's loss, the 2024 election loss, on Democrats supporting transgender athletes and the trans community generally. Now, this, of course, hasn't gone well with the transgender community, with Seth Moulton, okay, which most recently had him being heckled and booed when Moulton attended this year's Pride Parade in Boston in early June. Well, Moulton is now challenging Massachusetts Senator Ed Markey. Back when I lived in Massachusetts in the late 80s, Ed Markey was running for Congress. Okay, so Ed Markey's been around a long time, but don't let his age or longevity fool you on this topic, okay? Because Moulton is challenging Ed Markey. So Moulton is a congressman. He's now thrown his hat in for the Democratic primary for senator. Primaries on September 1st in Massachusetts. So he's challenging sitting Senator Ed Markey. And unlike Moulton, Ed Markey has become a hell of a trans ally, which has included co-sponsoring a transgender bill of rights. And as reported by Erin Reed on her Erin in the Morning blog, this week, Markey and Moulton had a debate. And Brett's going to play a clip now of what trans allyship looks like in the Democratic Party in July of 2026. You're going to hear Ed Markey. Go ahead, Brett.
There's a clear difference between my record and Congressman Moulton's. You are right. That's a very good question. Because after the 2024 election, Congressman Moulton decided that he was going to throw trans kids under the bus, the political bus, and blame them for the loss of the 2024 election. Those kids are vulnerable. Those kids need love. Those kids don't need to be scapegoated and blamed for what was wrong with the Democratic Party. And that's why I've introduced the Trans Bill of Rights to enshrine in law those protections for trans kids that are enjoyed by every other American and every other kid, because it is just wrong to take out these kids and to make them live in fear. And that, unfortunately, is part of what Congressman Moulton's comments led to.
Thank you, Senator.
And unfortunately, the Supreme Court of the United States of America just last week took the same position that Congressman Moulton took last year. They have now said that states across the country, and 29 have these laws, can discriminate against transgender kids. They can just scapegoat them. Massachusetts, we have laws to protect them. That's good. But I'm the leader with my transgender Bill of Rights to lead the movement so that those protections are made possible all across the country. The Supreme Court of the United States took the same position as Congressman Moulton.
Wow. Trans kids have the right to be safe, have the right to be loved, have the right to be able to participate in sports, to not be scapegoated. That is what allyship looks like. That is what allyship is from a Democrat. Absolutely. Okay, but he's not the only one. Another example of trans allyship came a couple of weeks ago from State of Washington Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, the mother who happens to be the mother of a transgender daughter. So you've heard me say before, there's nothing like changing your mind about transgender people until having somebody show up in your family who you love as transgender. Okay. So God love her. Okay. She loves her trans daughter. Now on the floor, a couple of weeks ago, on the floor of the House, Representative Jayapal honored a woman named Juniper Blessing. Juniper was a 19-year-old transgender University of Washington student who was fatally stabbed in a laundry room in her dorm or where she was living in May. So she was murdered in May. And Juniper Blessing apparently was well loved and valued by her community. Now, Representative Jayapal, who was also joined on the floor by New Mexico Congresswoman Teresa Leger Fernandez, spoke about Juniper Blessing's life and how she was beloved by her friends and her community. Jayapal displayed a large picture of Juniper, and you see Juniper, this woman with wavy, beautiful black hair, kind of prone on a wall, a rock wall, and behind her was a valley. It looks like in Washington State, a valley of trees and forests. Often, I mean, it was a beautiful picture of a beautiful woman, and so Representative Jayapal had this huge picture of Juniper Blessing on the floor of the House, talking about and honoring Juniper Blessing, a murdered trans woman. And then she asked, if you can believe this, okay? She asked for a moment of silence from her colleagues in the House. Now, whether the Republicans gave a moment of silence, I don't know, okay? But she asked for a moment of silence. And in a place where they have rules barring transgender women from utilizing restroom facilities according to their gender identity. And so that's another form of bravery, to call out your colleagues and to ask them to stop and think about the murder. And we know that transgender people, particularly transgender women of color, and Juniper Blessing, I think, was white, but we know that transgender people face incredible threats of violence and actual violence. And for Representative Jayapal to ask everybody to stop to honor this woman, this transgender woman, I think was extraordinary. In turn, after that, okay, at the end of June, Representative Jayapal joined Ed Markey to introduce the Transgender Bill of Rights. Now, both of these elected officials show what it means to support transgender folks. It does. And we are seeing more candidates for political office. We're seeing, the Social Democrats are certainly very pro-transgender. We're seeing some mainline Democrats coming out, supporting trans people and just saying, I'm not going to care. I'm going to take the hit if that's going to be the hit, but I'm going to support trans people. And both of them, okay, Jayapal and Ed Markey, okay, both of them are brave. Both of them are doing what is needed for our community. They are. And it warms my heart to see finally somebody saying, I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to do the thing that is right for another group of people that are marginalized, a group of people who literally, I mean, this show is one of the few exceptions who literally do not have a voice of their own. It's incredibly important. So listeners, here's what I ask you to do. Start following Ed Markey. Start following Pramila Jayapal, okay? Follow them. You know, if you can have the resources, write a check, because we need them to be re-elected. We do. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to do the big interview with Christopher Wiggins. You're going to find this to be an incredibly remarkable and fascinating interview. You're listening to me, Ellie Crew, with the Illegal Trans Woman on AM 950 in the Twin Cities and WCPT 820 in Chicago. Thank you, Ellie. Let's get that right. Okay, we'll be back in a second. Back. Ellie Krug with the Illegal Trans Woman, and now it's time for the big interview, and I am just absolutely thrilled to be able to talk to a giant in the journalistic field as it relates to LGBTQ plus matters. Christopher Wiggins is the politics and news editor of The Advocate, which is one of the best magazines that you can absolutely get if you are queer or if you're LGBTQ plus ally, and where he leads on The Advocate national coverage at the intersection of public policy, politics, and LGBTQ plus lives. He is based in Washington, D.C. He is an award-winning journalist. He's also been nominated for a bunch of awards. Christopher Wiggins, thank you for being on the Illegal Trans Woman.
Thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you. And I guess we should probably let the audience know that you and I have talked before, because you had me on a podcast about my work as a school board member. And so it's just great to have you back. I've never forgotten about you, and I hope that our relationship continues beyond this interview. Okay, I'm having you on because you dropped a piece in The Advocate this week about one of the writers, person of color, that was on the Metro in D.C. when the Proud Boys all showed up in mass, hundreds of them on the Metro. That writer was named Roswell. Is it Encina? Roswell Encina? Yes. And you were able to track him down and speak to him. And then you wrote this piece about it. And please tell us a little bit. First, tell us about what happened in D.C., and then we'll get to your interview with Roswell.
Yeah, so I want to clarify, it's not the Proud Boys, it's Patriot Front.
Patriot Front. Thank you.
And so Patriot Front is a white supremacist group that kind of started after the 2017 Charlottesville incident, where there were a bunch of white supremacists and people died in a march there on in town. They have been trying to push and recruit, white men into their group to essentially restore an America where white people are at the top of the pecking order and everyone else is either second class or not at all a citizen of the country. And it's run by this guy named Thomas Rousseau. He usually wears kind of a cowboy hat and doesn't obscure his face, but the rest of them, they tend to wear kind of a uniform that includes a blue t-shirt or coat, a hat, sunglasses, a white face mask to cover their face so that no one can tell who they are. They wear khaki pants, and they just look like a modern day version of what the KKK looks like if you think about back in the day when they would run around and march publicly in their white robes and hoods. This group has gotten larger over the last several years. It kind of started as a fringe group and is now still fringe, but their numbers are growing. And so this weekend they had a march in which more than 400 of them were running around during the 4th of July, intimidating people with their messages.
In DC. And, I saw the video on the 4th, with them all in mass. They were all lined up like in military formation. What scared the heck out of me was the number of them. This wasn't ragtag. This was 100 disciplined, all chanting slogans in unison, and then they all started marching in unison like military precision. Christopher, I saw that and that just scared me because it looks like they're getting better at what they're doing,
Yeah, they were in DC earlier this year during a like an anti-abortion thing that was going on in the National Mall, and JD Vance was speaking there, and on the other end of the National Mall, Patriot Front were amassing and marching, and they have been running around. They showed up at a Pride event in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, several years ago, and essentially shut that down. They've grown in their numbers and in what they will do.
Yeah, and that's the whole idea, of course, for them to grow and then greater force, and be very intimidating. Okay, so they apparently took, the metro, the subway in DC, which also extends into Maryland. They apparently took it from Maryland into DC. They did their march, and they did their, chanting and all of that stuff. And then apparently they got back on the metro to go back to the burbs. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it's hard to say where they came from because they kind of show up. They usually use U-Hauls to get themselves places and bring their kind of shields and flags places. But they did leave on the metro.
On the metro, okay. And this is where they encountered a number of people of color riding on the metro. And what first I saw was the picture of the woman who was sitting facing the photographer, who I understand was Finn Gomez with Getty, and who, the woman looking and just being, totally surrounded by these Patriot Front people. But then there apparently were some other pictures, including one of Roswell Encina, who was sitting there, obviously not looking very comfortable. And then you were able to track him down. Am I right about that?
Yeah. So the photo of the woman that you're talking about, that was actually taken by a Reuters photographer named Cheney Orr.
Okay. Thank you for that.
There were two photographers that kind of have really famous photos from this now. The photos that of the photographer that you're talking about, Finn Gomez, he took this photo of Roswell Encina, who is a Filipino American, and he took another photo of a black gentleman who was standing kind of at the end of the metro car at a door, and it just looked like the Patriot Front members were surrounding that man.
Right. This is modern America, 2026. You were able to track down Roswell and speak to him. And what did you find? And what did he tell you?
So, after I saw these photos, I was really eager to find who these people were. And it just so happened that I stumbled across a mutual Instagram friend that I have, whom I know, who was connected to Roswell. And I guess the algorithm kind of triggered his post for me. And I saw that. Then I learned that he's not only a Filipino American man, but a gay man as well, and that he's the president of the U.S. Capitol Historical Society. And so, putting those pieces together, I reached out, and I reached out immediately, and it wasn't until I think the late afternoon that he then agreed to speak with me, because at first he was also hesitant to kind of come out and put himself out there in that way.
Okay. Yeah, I can imagine that. And he was, if I understand correctly, he was on the metro riding out of DC to go to a 4th of July party with some friends in Maryland.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was heading to Maryland to go to this party with friends, and he said that before the Patriot Front people, before he noticed them get on the train, things were normal. It was families with children and tourists running around because they were sightseeing for the 4th of July. And then things changed.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, the image of him in the car, I mean, it looks like it's totally packed with, Patriot Front people, totally packed, some sitting, a lot standing because it was so crowded. Okay, so what did Roswell tell you about how he felt about that experience? And in a second, I'm going to read a little bit out of his Instagram post because he's a very eloquent man. But what did he relay to you?
Well, he said that at first he didn't really know what was going on because he wasn't necessarily aware of what was happening, and it was jarring to him to see that this was going on. And he said that the Finn Gomez, the photographer who gave him kind of reassurance that things would be at least documented, which made him feel more comfortable. But he said he was terrified, is that he was absolutely terrified because he didn't know what the motivation was, right? He just saw this huge group of masked people who are known for their racist views, and here they are, and he's now one of very few people of color on this train with them.
Apparently he didn't know that they were coming back from a march. All he knows is it's just a whole lot of these people showing up in his metro rail car.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, notwithstanding the terror, it sounds to me like he was very brave. I mean, he didn't shirk. He didn't get off early. He rode the train. And he told you some things about his experience as a Filipino, because he came, if I understand correctly, came here to the U.S. as an infant, and then became naturalized. What was your takeaway and your sense from him? And what, on a larger scale, is your takeaway from all of this?
What my greatest takeaway is that he did not lose his sense of being an American and of self. He actually, we talked a bit, I didn't include this in the story, but we talked a bit about why he didn't get off the train. And he said that he just really didn't know what to do. He said he tried to keep himself as small and also as out of their face as possible so as not to antagonize them. He said he averted his eyes. He didn't want to call any attention to him, which is probably also why he chose not to get off the train, but just to remain sitting. Of course, he didn't know that they were going to actually take the same exit that he was waiting for, but that was like 25 minutes later. But
oh my God, that must have added to the terror. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And then ultimately he said he was just really relieved. He had texted friends while he was on the train, telling them what was happening and where he was, because he wanted to at least have someone who knew what was going on. And then he felt really relieved when ultimately he was able to part ways from them after they got off the train. Most of all, I think what I learned from his retelling of it is that, these people, they want you to be afraid. They want you to change your behavior and to disappear. And although it's up to everyone to do whatever they feel is safest for them in the moment, I think it's important to, without confrontation, to really take the space that you are owed, and not disappear when these groups are trying to push us out of the public view.
Well, as I said earlier, I thought that he went and wrote on Instagram. That's how, you found him. And I thought what he wrote was incredibly eloquent. I'm going to just read a little bit from his post. his Instagram post, which I think showed up on July 5th. He wrote, quote, "I came to this country as an infant and became a U.S. citizen. So sitting there on the 4th of July, I couldn't help but think about the promise of America and the work still required to protect it. Our history has never been simple. It is a story of extraordinary achievement and expanding freedom, but also of exclusion, prejudice, and people determined to decide who belongs. Yet, generation after generation, Americans have pushed our nation closer to its founding ideals. The words, all are created equal, were not a description of who we were in 1776. They were a challenge to every generation that followed." And then he writes, he closes with this, "Moments like this remind me of why civic education matters. Democracy is strongest when we understand it, participate in it, and reject the hatred that threatens it. That's work worth doing every day," unquote. Incredibly, incredibly eloquent. And for a man who, I mean, I think that we can say was at least implicitly terrorized on that train, to come away writing such powerful words speaks, of course, about his character, and of course you can hear the emotion in my voice because it represents where we all need to get, Christopher. I mean, it really does. It represents what we have to, all the hard work, and we keep going backwards rather than forward. I mean, I just, but let's talk about this fear, because that's really, I mean, this is what everybody, all those who want to marginalize, this is what they're capitalizing on. It's fear. It's fear coming out of the White House. It's fear coming out of MAGA. And it's literally these men dressed as they are, all white men, dressed as they are, operating in unison. I mean, it's not a bunch of ragtags operating in unison. And what, to me, when I see that, it signals we're getting ready. We're prepared. We're preparing even more for that day. And I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I know a whole lot of trans people and trans women are fearing that day. Okay? Because we know what happens when that day comes. And I don't want to sound alarmist, and please, Christopher, rein me in, okay? But it's all around fear. Your thoughts?
I don't know what it's like to live in this country and be trans, but I talk to trans people every day, and I am very on top of what this administration is doing to the trans community, what Republicans across the country are doing to transgender people. And I would not fault anyone in the trans community of being absolutely petrified and not knowing what is going to come next, because the government has proven itself to not be protecting its own citizens, and in fact weaponizing their identity in such a way that it is making the American public question whether transgender people are part of the fabric of America. So, we can level set there. What I will say is that I think that these people who mask themselves, the same people who probably refused to put on a mask during COVID because it was probably causing them whatever complaint that they could come up with, for them to feel emboldened to come out and parade around, but kind of put on a clown show, because if you can separate yourself from it and just look at them, it's obvious just that they're a bunch of losers who have nothing better going on. Now, of course, these are also probably doctors and business leaders and police officers and other people who probably have influence on public life.
Right.
But to cover themselves, I think, really still says that it has not crossed the threshold into something that the public would accept, right? If they're still covering themselves up, hiding who they are, they know that the public is not behind them. And it's the same thing with the government and ICE agents and keeping them masked. It's the same kind of thing. ICE agents, of course, come with the force of government power, and who knows, like, I'm sure that the same people who are Patriot Front would be part of the insurrection if there were another one. But that's all I can really offer. I don't put it, I don't begrudge anyone their fear, if that's something one can say, because I think it's warranted for sure.
Yeah, that's an excellent point about the fact that they still cover their faces because they haven't been totally accepted. And of course, that reminds me of the KKK.
Yeah.
Because rarely did you ever see a Klansman without the hood on. And although, as you know, as they progressed in power in the 20s, we saw more people with the hoods off. But we fought that back. I mean, the Klan movement went away, and I mean, at least as powerful as it was at one time with marching through Washington, D.C. I think you and I, we've talked before, and I think I told you I'm an idealist. Okay. I am somebody who believes in the ability of singular people to make a positive difference in the world. I do.
Yeah.
This radio show is founded on idealistic principles. Me running for school board, and by the way, I'm coming up for re-election. Me running for school board was based on idealistic principles and ideas, and I have to believe that anonymous people, okay, like Roswell Encina, who he could have faded off into the distance. He did not have to write what he did on Instagram and then become very public. But I've got to believe that people like Roswell and Encina, that there are literally millions of Roswells out there, literally. And that to me, that's our hope. That's I think maybe our only hope, Christopher.
Yeah. Well, and I should mention, like, he said to me that he chose to come forward because he knows that he's also the former chief communications officer at the Library of Congress. So he knows that he has a platform, right? He knows how to leverage the press. And so he said that he wanted to do it on behalf of the other people who were in these other photos that we talked about at the beginning of our conversation. And it is also not the first time that he has done this. Back during the the height of COVID, there was a moment when he and another Asian woman were on the metro, and a group of young people threw frappuccinos at them. And the woman was so terrified in that moment, but they left everyone else alone. And it was some of that anti-Asian hate that bubbled up in the first Trump administration. And ultimately, he filed a police report and dealt with that on behalf of those people. And so this is kind of what he does, and he really deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, he's like my hero, my instant hero. Well, Christopher, we're out of time here. I just want to, first of all, I want to thank you for your reporting. Okay, thank you for what you're doing in the world. I'd love to have you back on the show again. I mean, I follow you and I follow your stories, and your reporting is incredibly important. But thanks for this piece in particular. You put a really wonderful human element to the piece. And I just wish you good luck as you go forward. And we're in it together, pal, right?
Well, yes, we are in it together. It's all about coalitions of people. And I really appreciate that you had me on and that you read my work and that you have all those kind things to say about me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, listeners, we've been speaking with Christopher Wiggins, who is an editor with The Advocate. Check him out. Just Google his name, Christopher Wiggins. You'll be able to follow and find some great writing. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to do my weekly news bites. Listen to me, Ellie Krug, on the Illegal Trans Woman. We're back. Ellie Krug with the illegal trans woman. Okay, Christopher Wiggins. Again, follow him. I think that he's a great writer and he's got wonderful stories. And I just want you, when you're done with listening to this show, I want you to think of how you would feel on that metro subway car if you were surrounded by all those Patriot Front people and you were the only one of you in the car. Just think about it. It's, oh my goodness. Okay. All right. News bites. Speaking of allyship, to carry on from the big story, our trans community got another dose of hope and another dose of allyship from a group of folks that you might not ever think would be trans friendly. I am talking about the Daughters of the American Revolution. And if you don't know what the DAR is, it's a 130-year-old organization whose membership is open to any adult woman who can trace their lineage to a patriot involved in the fight for America's independence. Okay. I mean, so we're like talking a bunch of women, you know, who we're going to think that maybe are fairly conservative. I don't know. Although, you know, the Patriots came in on Massachusetts, you know, with Ed Markey, I just, you know, talked about it earlier, you know, Massachusetts at any rate. Okay. But the DAR, the Daughters of American Revolution, have not always been known for being egalitarian. I mean, they have within their long 130-year history, a lot of decades of racial intolerance and bigotry. For a long time, it was a whites-only organization. All of that has changed, okay? It started changing in the 60s. All of that has changed, and they've become more accepting. I mean, they have 170, believe this or not, 175 members in 3,000 chapters. Now, as reported by Giuseppe Lopez in the online magazine Them, in late June, there was a vote on whether the DAR should ban transgender women from the organization. Apparently, there are already some trans women in the organization, but this was a vote to ban them, to expel them, and to ban any future trans women from being a DAR member. Okay, so they had a vote, all right, and remarkably, at that vote, okay, those in favor of keeping transgender women as part of DAR numbered 1,474. Now, there were 981 women who voted to ban trans women, okay, but still, that's got to give you some great hope. It really does, and so it gives me wonderful hope. So DAR, thank you. And if you are a member of the DAR listening to the show, will you please email me at lejkrug@gmail.com? I would love to hear from you. I really would. All right. Story number 2. I got no time to tell you. Remember several months ago, I talked about the suicide prevention line 988 that had dropped the button, okay, that would allow you, if you were LGBTQ plus, to speak to somebody who's LGBTQ plus on the suicide prevention line, somebody who would understand what it meant, okay, to be LGBTQ plus, and maybe be able to talk you better about not committing suicide, not taking your life. Okay, they dropped that button. Okay, they dropped the reference to the resource for queer people. Well, the good news is, okay, that they now want to bring back button number 3. Okay, Congress, in its fiscal 2026 directive, said to bring back button number 3. But the problem is we still have Trump's executive order saying that there are only 2 sexes assigned at birth. Okay, but the executive order in theory can't override federal law. So, Congress is telling the 988 people, you got to do this. 988 people are like, okay, but we've got Trump telling us we can't recognize trans people. I don't know how they're going to fix it, but it sounds like they're going to have to fix it. I'm going to follow this story because 988 is very important. If you are considering taking your life or ending your life or harming yourself, please dial 988. You'll get somebody who can talk to you. I promise you'll get someone. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, random acts. I got several, and then we're going to be done with this show. You're listening to me, Ellie Krug, on the Illegal Trans Woman. Back in a sec. And we're back. Random Acts is where I talk about various and assorted things, some involving me, some not. Okay, now you may recall a couple months ago, I told you that this show, The Illegal Trans Woman, was ranked number 41 out of 100 trans-related, trans-focused podcasts, okay? 41, I don't know how much you get crazy about that, but it's better than being 71, okay? Not as good as being 21, but nonetheless. And so I'm grateful to an organization, actually a podcast organization called FeedSpot for that ranking. And I think I was amiss not to highlight them before, but I'm highlighting them now. If you want to get more information about that ranking on trans podcasts, or if you want to just get more information, maybe expand your horizon for podcasts, go to podcast.feedspot.com and you'll be able to find it. The organization is called FeedSpot. All right. Feedspot.com. All right. That's number one. Number two, postcards keep coming in. Remember, I have talked off and on about this group of women out in Carver County, a red to purple county in Minnesota where I live. This group of women who call themselves the Resisters, R-E, and then S-I-S-T-E-R-S, who have intermittently sent me a number of postcards telling me how important, it is that the work that I'm doing, that they believe in my work. Now I'm getting postcards saying, Ellie, we want you to run for school board again. There'll be an announcement about that coming up. I have to declare by the end of the month if I'm going to run again. But resistors, if you hear this show, I want you to continue to know that I really, really value you doing that. And everyone, this has been a show about allyship. Okay, there you go. Allyship right there. And so, it's also a reminder about the value of the written word. Texts are nice, emails are fine, but I got those postcards. I can go back to those postcards anytime, and I have done it a couple of times so far, to be reminded, okay, because sometimes things are tough, and it's great to see that written word. Okay, item number 3. I am working on this road trip to the Pacific Northwest. I've talked with you about it. I'm calculating it's going to be maybe a 16-day trip. Calculating that it's going to cost, well, I don't know what it's going to cost, but that it's going to be about a 5,000-mile trip by the time I get done, maybe even more than that. I have tried to arrange talks in a number of places. And so far, well, at this point, it's too late for anybody else to bite. But who has bitten are churches in Idaho Falls, Idaho, and a church in Boise. And then a human rights center, believe it or not, in Boise called the Wassmuth, W-A-S-S-M-U-T-H Center. And I'm going to be speaking at all 3 of those places as part of this road trip. I am absolutely looking forward to it. I'm going to be doing gray area thinking multiple times. I might be doing another separate talk in addition to gray area thinking for the Wassmuth Center. I am totally psyched about this because, as you know, Boise, not a place for transgender people, but it's a place where I need to go to normalize trans folks. So I'm going to do that. A little disappointed in Portland. I sent out over 15 inquiries. Nobody responded except one person who wrote back and said, well, we can't, fit you in. But everybody else, totally blank, including, me contacting PFLAG in Portland and contacting a queer center in Portland. No. All right. That's enough complaining. I got to go. A big thanks to my producer, Brett, who always does such great work here. Listeners, please continue to share about this show. Send links to this. Tell people about it because we're trying to expand it as much as possible. I'm really grateful for your listenership. And between now and when you hear my voice next, go out and do something good for someone else as well as for you, too. Ellie Krug, over and out.